This video contains spoilers for Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy X-2, so if you haven't played these games and completed them, I highly recommend you finish them and then come back. When Final Fantasy X ended, it felt, well, final. A sweeping, tragic, beautiful conclusion. Tidus fades away with that one final smile, jumping off the ship, fading into obscurity. Yuna delivers her heartbreaking goodbye, and for the first time in centuries, Spira is free of sin. It was an ending that really stuck with me. And it's one of those credit roll moments where I just sat there in silence, letting the emotions settle in. So imagine being one of those players in 2003. You spent maybe a few years replaying Final Fantasy X, maxing out your sphere grid, trying to dodge some more lightning, memorizing its music, and yeah, carrying that bittersweet farewell in your heart. And then all of a sudden the sequel comes out and you boot it up, spotlights and weird J-pop dancing and singing, and it's just like, what? And honestly, for some, this was the moment where the series kind of lost its way. But for others, it was a bizarre curiosity. And for a dedicated few, I mean, it was love at first sight. I can tell you that. But here's the thing. Beneath the glitter, beneath the J-pop, beneath the campy theatrics, Final Fantasy X-2 hides one of the most mechanically satisfying and narratively bold entries in the entire series. It's a sequel that shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. Today's video, I'm really excited to chat about one of my favorites, Final Fantasy X-2. I actually haven't talked about this at all on my channel, so I'm really excited to kind of dive in and reminisce about this game that really captivated me when I was a lot younger. So before we get to that, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on X-2. Did you like it? Did you give it a miss back in the day? I think it's had enough time to cook on the Final Fantasy ether that we can look at it objectively and appreciate it for what it is. So let's get to the video. I'm really excited to chat about this one. A direct sequel to a mainline Final Fantasy game was unheard of back then. These games were always standalone adventures. I mean, when they ended, that was it. But X-2 dared to revisit a world that had already wrapped up, dare I say, perfectly. And it's not just any world, it was Spira, the setting of one of the most beloved Final Fantasy stories ever told. Right away, Final Fantasy X-2 sets itself apart as a bold entry. Instead of continuing Final Fantasy X's linear pilgrimage structure, it drops you into like a mission-based adventure across a few different chapters. You're free to travel, explore, and tackle objectives in pretty much any order you want to, directly opposing the linear structure of Final Fantasy X. And narratively, instead of focusing on a looming shadow of sin, it's about what comes after, what happens when the world wakes up the day after the happy ending and realizes maybe happily ever after doesn't exist, or maybe it does. I don't know. And Yuna is no longer the reserved summoner bound by duty. Now she's a sphere hunter, traveling with Riku and the newcomer, Pain. Her mission is personal, chasing the faint hope that Tidus might still be alive after a mysterious sphere shows a man who looks exactly like him. And that single thread pulls her into a world of tension, grudges, and some stuff powerful enough to destroy the calm they've all fought for. The tone shift here is unmistakable. Where Final Fantasy X was solemn and cinematic, X-2 is playful, self-aware, and honestly a little bit wild. But the contrast works perfectly because it reflects the world's state. After centuries of oppression, people are experimenting, they're laughing, they're living their lives. And the stakes might not be as apocalyptic at first, but in Final Fantasy X-2, they're just as personal. One of the joys of Final Fantasy X-2 is revisiting familiar locations and seeing exactly how they've changed since the ending of Final Fantasy X. The calm lands are no longer a quiet expanse, they're a tourist hub. Luca is bustling with entertainment, and it's not just Blitzball either. Even Besaid, Yuna's peaceful home island, feels lighter, as if a weight has been lifted off from every conversation. But exploration isn't just about nostalgia, it's about opportunity. X-2's mission structure means that nearly every location has objectives, mini-stories, or even treasures. The world feels connected in a way that Final Fantasy X didn't. Choices you make can influence on how certain things play out or what cutscenes you'll see later on. And this is also where Final Fantasy X-2 hides some of its best fan service. And I don't just mean the outfits. There are these video spheres scattered across Spira, and they act as windows into Final Fantasy X's past. You might just stumble upon a sphere showing Auron, and aside from the video spheres, you might even see a cutscene with Lulu and Waka in ways the original game never showed. They're like emotional callbacks, deepening your connection to both games. And of course, there's the gameplay, the part of 10.2 that still gets talked about in reverent tones. And one thing I haven't talked about at all on this channel, despite how often I've talked about Final Fantasy and battle systems. Square Enix didn't just tweak Final Fantasy X's turn-based combat. They scrapped it entirely in favor of a hyper-fast, active-time battle system, one of the most kinetic in the series. At the core is the dress sphere and the garment grid system, essentially a modernized job system. Each dress sphere changes your class, the abilities, and the combat style, from black mage to warrior to songstress, and other things in between. And here's the genius part. You can change jobs mid-fight. This basically means that every encounter is a puzzle. How do you use your grid to react to the enemy's strengths and weaknesses? And the hunt for dress spheres is half the fun. Some are given through the story, but the best are hidden in obscure corners of the world. Maybe you find one deep inside a long-forgotten ruin, or as a reward for completing something really boring and unrelated like side quests. That makes the exploration more thrilling, because you're not just hunting loot, for example, you're unlocking entirely new ways to play. It really is a callback to Final Fantasy's older job systems, I would say probably 5 in particular, but with a more slick and flashy twist. Each dress sphere comes with unique animations and costumes, making experimentation rewarding in both form and function. And yes, while some of it is a bit cringy, just remember this is the early 2000s after all, and personally, I really loved it back then, and I still do now. And layered on top of this is the variety of side content. I mean, Blitzball, you think that would be done after the main character from Final Fantasy X, Tidus, disappears? No, it's back, and it's maybe better than ever. There's chocobo ranching and monster hunting and other silly missions. Like, it's just, there's so much stuff to do if you're a completionist here as well. And take note, if you want the perfect ending, you might have to actually invest yourself in all of this side content. Now, hang on before we get any further in the video. Did you guys know that almost 90% of the people that watch my channel on the regular are not subscribed? That is a huge number of people. So if you want to stay tuned with my rankings, my reviews, retrospectives, list videos, top 10s, all that great stuff, hit that subscribe button. It's free and it supports the channel in a huge way. So anyway, more Final Fantasy X-2 right now. Now, while the gameplay is outstanding, the story has more emotional weight than it gets credit for. Yuna's arc is about moving on, really. I mean, in Final Fantasy X, she walked a road set by others, but in X-2, she's carving a path on her own. And the game constantly ties that growth to the people she meets and the spheres she finds. Each video sphere isn't just like a plot device, it's a connection to her past, a reminder of what she's lost, and a hint of what might still be out there. And longtime fans get rewarded with little narrative gifts. I mean, occasionally you'll check in on Waka and Lulu and their growing family, see how Kimahri is moving forward after the events of Final Fantasy X. And even minor characters from Final Fantasy X pop up every now and again, living in Spira that feels freer, but also more complicated at the same time. Now, I haven't mentioned this at all yet, but the look-alike Tidus figure that you find, his name is actually Shuyin. He's a spirit from Spira's past who looks almost identical to Tidus, but it's kind of like the opposite. He's consumed by bitterness and hate. Obviously, unlike Tidus, who embodied hope and selflessness, Shuyin is driven by the grief of his lover, Len, a famous songstress from 1,000 years ago. And Len's tragic fate, being executed for trying to stop the misuse of a destructed superweapon, binds her story to Shuyin's, and her presence lingers in Yuna's journey as well. Now, early in the game, Yuna discovers that her new songstress dress sphere actually contains Len's memories, and whenever she performs, fragments of Len's surface, and this creates a very unique narrative link. Yuna is haunted not only by her longing for Tidus, but also reliving Len's doomed story through the songstress role, tying together the, themes of love and loss here, and struggling to move on from the past. Now, all of this builds toward the ending, or rather, endings. The default conclusion has Yuna accepting Tidus's loss and moving forward, but if you've played carefully and made the right choices and explored the world thoroughly, you unlock the perfect ending. Wow, now let me tell you, this is without a doubt the most emotional moment for me in Final Fantasy. Being so heavily invested in the game and the story of Final Fantasy X, and how Tidus just disappears at the end of Final Fantasy X, only to later find out that he comes back in X-2. Let me tell you, it was a Final Fantasy fan's amazing dream. I used to look up videos of this back in the day. Like, I would go to dogpile.com and watch these fan-made videos with Creed playing over them, watching Yuna and Tidus reunite. Honestly, What a time to be alive. But the actual cutscene itself, it's short, it's quiet. Then he's just there. There's no fanfare, there's no speech. It's just two people reunited after years apart. And for those who carry the heartbreak of Final Fantasy X like me, it's devastating in the best way. It's honestly, every time I watch it, I cry. It's a reminder that sometimes the impossible can actually happen. Now, the soundtrack was one of the most controversial changes from Final Fantasy X. Obviously, with Nobuo Uematsu stepping aside and only really working on a little bit of 10. Now, he's out of the picture by this point. So Noriko Matsueda and Takahito Eguchi created a score unlike anything the series had seen before. It's got a mix of upbeat pop and jazz and electronic beats. Real emotion sets the tone of the game. I love that. Honestly, I used to dance in my room to that song. That was a banger. I mean, yes, it's divisive, but all these songs match the game's spirit. It's a spirit that's brighter, riskier, and more experimental than ever. It really works. When Final Fantasy X-2 first released, it stood as something of an anomaly in the series. A direct sequel to a numbered Final Fantasy was, honestly, we never would have heard of that. And for years, it was treated as the odd one out of the franchise's lineup. But over time, I think we've started to recognize just how ahead of its time it truly was. Its mission-based structure and open-ended character design foreshadowed elements that we would later see in more open-world Final Fantasies. And even the emphasis on optional content and replayability hinted at a direction that the series would explore in different ways for years to come. And beyond mechanics, X-2 left a mark on how the series handles tone. It proved that a Final Fantasy could radically shift its presentation from the somber gravitas of 10 to a playful pop-infused adventure without losing any emotional depth whatsoever. And the game's willingness to take risks with presentation, aesthetics, and structure paved the way for future titles to be bolder in breaking tradition. And perhaps the biggest part of Final Fantasy X-2's legacy is its redemption arc in the eyes of the fans. What was once dismissed as just a dress-up game is now praised for its mechanical brilliance, narrative structure, and emotional payoff, especially with that perfect ending. I suppose nowadays it's being placed in more of a favorable light, with many now considering it to be one of the most engaging entries in the series, especially for a spin-off. And in a way, X-2's journey mirrors Yuna's own, underestimated at first, but ultimately proving to be more stronger, more capable, and more enduring than anyone expected. So when it was launched, it was easy to misunderstand. The pop idol opening, the playful tone, the departure from Uematsu's musical style, it all felt different for some, but with time, its boldness has aged quite well. X-2 didn't just give fans more spirit, it gave them a sandbox of creativity and a story about hope and agency and one of the most satisfying combat systems in the series. It proved that sequels could do more than just extend a story, it could just reinvent it. So if you skipped it back in 2003, or if you bounced off its glittery exterior, maybe it's time to give it another shot. Beneath the glamour and the giggles, there's a game that delivers both one of Final Fantasy's richest gameplay experiences and one of its most heartfelt endings. So that's a look back at Final Fantasy X-2. I could have gone a lot deeper, but for the sake of time, I didn't want it to be like a 20-30 minute video, basically recounting every single aspect of it. I like to be a little bit more broad and appreciate it for what it is. But I tell you what, I really loved this game as a kid. I loved the music. I loved the intro cutscenes. It was just a really great and captivating adventure and a really great supplementary game for Final Fantasy X, which is one of my favorite games of all time. Is this one of the best games of all time? No, not really, but it's really great for those of you who love 10 and just want a little bit more of the world in maybe a less serious tone. Not that it's not a serious game, but yeah, you know what I mean. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week on another video. Bye-bye.